Podcast 7. And 7 is correct commitment. And we could say that correct partnership, even though I asked a question about what to do with the rest of the world, the answer was as you got it in the previous podcast. And that means that there are some processes that we need to go through. When we look at the other scenarios of our past and our collective human history, we marvel over what's left in granite, the building blocks, Puma Punka and other places. And we're marveling over what type of technology that they had. And we are not marveling so much over what led to the destruction of these civilizations. We are definitely contemplating, but we are not really going into the depths of how come there used to be civilizations that were much more advanced than we are. And that's due to the way science is built up today, that we are the peak of all civilizations, and we have been deluded into believing that we are on an up running curve into larger amounts of civilized manner, including the Kardashev scale that teaches us that a level 1 civilization knows how to harness the energies of its reality field. And just listen to that. As we know, nothing is infinite. The moment you begin to harness the energy of your reality field, 0.0 energy, you're beginning to deplete the very world that you're part of. Anyways, we are in that manner a type of level 1 civilization. We are not harnessing the energies, but we are distorting it for a large degree, and we are not giving anything back, which is one of the first important things when we talk about advanced civilizations, is that keeping the balance. Everything's a balance. The fourth dimension, as we talked about, is a cross. And that means there needs to be a balance, there needs to be a coherence pattern, and there needs to be a giving back. We can't just take. We must also be givers. So there is an inbuilt balance there. And the civilizations that are no longer there, they didn't get that balance. And we are here again standing in the same situation. We didn't get it either. We had 3,000 years and we messed it up. Of course, we can say, well, it's because of the extraterrestrials and what they've been doing to us. And that's, of course, part of it. And in a way, this reality, the last 26,500 years of the original Pillar Project programs, the last leg of it, which we are in the end of, was with the knowledge that there were little to none possibilities of actually correcting this. So why the sour face here, and why that kind of information? Well, let us put it this way, the different groups have been here, whether they have been malevolent or benevolent, they have definitely tried everything that was in their power to continue whatever was going on here for whatever purpose. And at this point where we are looking into and looking back and doing an evaluation and say, okay, it's over now. There is no more chances. There are no more seconds. There are no more turn around. Whoever was here that had the technology has left. The ones that were part of the original programs are no longer here. That's been part of my work of releasing these and getting rid of what's left of the library, and things are collapsing and whatnot. We can look into with a type of process that is a grief process. And that should be taken in evaluation, where we sit and look at the world and really let it sink in. This world is now dying, as so many before us have done. Because all of the advanced civilizations, every time the 26,500 cycle reached its point where they either should elevate or descend into a lower vibrational state, which we are the lowest of, they had to go through the same thought process. I recall one last time, that was the time of Atlantis, where we had another wobble, some 52,000, 54,000 years ago, where the first time of Atlantis fell, because it fell in stages. The second one were shortly before we wobbled into this type of reality. That was the last leg of the fifth dimension that kind of faded away here, including the explosion of the fifth planet in our solar system. that changed the configuration of our entire solar system, and all the disasters that these projects that have been going on in our solar system has led to again and again and again. So with that understanding that project has failed too, and going back to that memory, I remember at that point it was we had the fifth and fourth dimension present of the original reality field, and the groups took off in crafts, which our type of civilization unfortunately does not have the capacity of. Yes, there are the rogue groups that have been working with extraterrestrial groups that have taken off. But they have their issues, and I'm not going to go into that because that's not really of my interest. That's just curiosity that will lead my remote viewing processes into realms I don't want to be part of, because what you look at, you become part of the low participation. So let's keep on our processes. We're now standing in front of a door that we are to open to the subsidiary timeline. We are not choosing to get on the subsidiary timeline. It's done by the reality field itself. The reality field itself, when we get to this point before the wobble, the last 1500 years, selects. And that has happened over the course of history. Every time we reach that point of the, let's just call it the pole shift, which is inaccurate, as you know from the previous podcast. But every time that the configuration of the planet changes or the reality field changes, there are always the invitees and the ones that are being excluded. And the ones that are being excluded are the civilizations that cease to exist. Sometimes their energy system will be recalibrated, as we have seen it as a reseeding, as we saw after the fall of Atlantis into the fourth cycle, but that's done to the councils. There is always this council discussion of there are the electees, or the ones that have been chosen by the continuation scheme. And then there are the ones that are naturally the herd, the big group, as you know from the Gospels, the narrow path and the big path, you know from Buddhism, the narrow path, the big path. We always have that. It's within all civilizations, the ones that are following the calling and the ones that are not. And there have always been prophets like me that are saying, oh, the world is ending. And every civilization has had that. There have been the smaller endings of civilizations that have ceased to exist. And then there are the larger ones of the large cycle that we are part of. So bear in mind, there are the smaller ones where communities and civilizations cease to exist because they are literally not doing what is necessary to continuing their progression journey. Whether it is just a community like where I am now on the island, where there are this resistance. Let me just talk a little bit about that. The resistance of change. 80% of the population on this island are older people of the old generation, old world order type of things in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they are just reluctant to change. They like it as it is. And they're dying in 2 split seconds. So they are not really looking into the future and what could happen to the island. They're just comfortable where they are because that's their life. And they're reluctant to let go of their life, as we are seeing on the unfortunate wildfires that are now roaming Los Angeles, and people are losing everything materialistic. And yes, it is devastating to lose your house and your items and everything you have. But it's also a learning process for those who are too ingrained into the matter program to realize, hey, sometimes you need to change. And if you can't change on your own, well, reality has a pretty hard kickback to telling you that whatever has been going on in Los Angeles and the Hollywood area and the wrongful use of energy and consciousness and matching or whatever, at some point there is a price to pay because reality kicks back. It needs its balance point. And that's the stagnant cross. It can only go so far into one tangent before it has to flip to the other one. And that's the downside with the stagnant cross. That's why it's better to be on the movable, changeable, fluctuating cross where we know everything is change. And we change before it gets to that position where it has to kick back and kick back hard to make us change our behavior, to undo the crystallization. So when things get too crystallized, reality kicks back. Unfortunately, now with the core cube that is no longer present and is done, it's initiated its complete cleanup process. And no, it's not about the new grand cycle activation and then we'll continue. No, this is end of days. This is the end of this reality field completely, not just as we know of it, as people are normally saying. It will be that for a couple of generations, 1500 years, and then that's it. Then this turns into Mars. And yes, there will be survivors that will live in their domes and with their advanced technology and learning to feed from pills and eventually live on spacecrafts in space and whatnot in this devastated, cold, dead universal structure, and some will move into the android worlds and whatnot. And yes, you can always say that's a continuation, but it's not one that's worth pursuing, because who wants to become a machine? Seriously. So with that understanding, proper progressive reality as we know of it is done in this solar system. And each civilization that has heard the calling of the subsidiary timeline that leads to a continuation, and the ones that have ignored it and have not in any ways or forms done the turnaround, have just been ingrained in their old ways, done the broad path of materialism, done the broad path of greed and desire. I sound like a prophet here, but that's the teachings. And that comes when we talk about correct commitment. We have to look back and evaluate and say, it's not that we haven't heard the teachings. Yes, they have been taken. Yes, they have been manipulated. Yes, they have been distorted. Yes, they have been turned into something they weren't. Yes, we did not have the right circumstances, etc., etc. But there is always some truth that has been there that has been ignored. And if we ignore things too long, then it becomes something that gets in where we get into trouble, especially if we still have a viability rate. So now I'm not pointing fingers to the ones that do not have a viability rate, or the clones or whatever's going on. And we have gone, those of you who have done my transition sciences and all my podcasts and followed me since 2013, we have gone through so many processes together with the absolute last possibility, the last windows of opportunity when the councils were still here, when there was still this constant attempt to try to make this world continue, and then just things have just been chipped away. The possibilities have just gone less and less and less and less because of the obstacles, the difficulties, the cleansing work, what was necessary to get there. And I have been all the way frustrated and angry and sad and all sorts of on the human scale of emotions, and you have most likely as well. And all of this frustration, it comes when you want to change something and all you meet is rigidity. So you get frustrated. You get frustrated when you can't change things. And then there are two possibilities. One, stop trying to change it, ignore it, pretend it's not there. Or two, do something completely different. Just let it go. Let it go and just say, I've done what I could. Now it's time for me to continue where there actually is a chance of change, where there is a chance of operating in ways that are conducive for my core essence. And you see, people that can't do that, they don't really have a viability rate. It's not about just saying me and my soul wants me to this, or my guides want me to this, or my higher self wants me to do this. That could both be that, but it could also be, it used to be some kind of programs. We will see the Atlantean timelines will definitely push for more types of spiritual teachings that will be more and more aligned with AI configuration type of technology. It will be more and more within the distorted cube technology. It will sound spiritual, but it's not. And that's some of the things the Syrian bees were trying to warn us with the Colontic Sciences and other groups that actually said, well, there are the opposition to the fifth dimension that's malevolent. And it's about time that humanity wake up to the understanding of these opposition and polarity games. I've given my version of it in the whole Academy course material. And it's, as you know, now for free, so everybody has a possibility. It's no longer, that's part of why I had to release it. It's no longer about a matter of the ones who wants to. It's a matter of, okay, now it needs to be given out for free so everybody can do it. So it's a kind of the last evac possibility that should be there. And when we talk about some of the sciences of other groups that have been given this, Yes, we are to get paid for our time spent to do the material and get paid for the effort that we have put into it. But the teachings themselves are not what we are paying for, because that should be something that everybody should have access to, but they don't. And at some point you can, in the beginning of the journey, you can teach it, but eventually there is no more than can be taught. It should come at some point from within. And that's a subsidiary timeline. It's not an invitation. It's not that you can work your way towards it. You have been born into throughout many lifetimes to get to the point where it would naturally invite you there. It's part of all the ancient teachings that says that those who are, even the esoterics today, the ones that are able to wake up in this reality as it is, unless they're part of some military project, artificially awoken by different forms of advanced technology and enhanced genetics. But the rest that have followed the old path of the original civilizations, they have, from the moment they got stuck in this cycle and turned into this very materialistic, outer domain, dense kind of configuration, there has been this ongoing opposition, polarity, forces, dynamic to push us to the progressive, dynamic, transformative cross, and not being stuck on the stagnant cross. And again, I'm not talking about what's mirrored of these original teachings into astrology. It's a mirror, it's distorted version you find in astrology. It's about being on a type of reality, fourth dimensional reality scheme where you can progress so you can continue. And yes, it has not been easy. And yes, we can mourn the loss of our true abilities, but there's always a choice. And those of us who are here, we made choices that led to this path. We are not innocents. I said that in the beginning in 2013. None of us are innocents. It's not done against us in that manner. We can have periods where we feel that. When I got through some of the very unpleasant levels of my clearing work, I definitely felt victimized and forced to do things I didn't choose. But once it's done and over, and I got recalibrated and they revived me, and the maintainer grace that pushed me through these programs, once I was revived and recalibrated and forgot these things, then it's just water under the bridge. But of course, people who have not had that possibility, for them, they are still in that nightmare. And we can say, well, for me, as a person, I can only talk on my own behalf. I can't talk on behalf of humanity. First and foremost, as you know, I came here to take down the Pillar Project, got captured, and then things just went south from there. But despite of that, there still was the white hats within these groups that have been trying to support those of us who actually could activate in whatever degree possible. And activation does not mean that you just activate and then you sit in bliss and samadhi and happiness. Because all teachings teaches us that reality is dukkha, everything's out of whack, and nothing is in harmony, and we are the ones that are to create the harmony and the balance, and then we are to change and transform the different rings and fields and whatever we're composed of to more subtle layers that becomes more and more purified until the state of either enlightenment, where we get the information from within or the true knowledge, or we connect to the higher order energy system, or however you want to put it. It's all about getting out of the three lower fields and everything that keeps us in the distortion, the dukkha, the whack, the wheel that's not turning, whatever you want to call it. So if you look into all of the different teaching systems, you will see there is some features that are similar, even though they've been highly distorted. The crucifixion of Christ. Christ is the consciousness of the fifth dimension. That's the Christ consciousness. That means it's capable of doing the transfiguration of the molecular level that has been crucified and then go into the grave, aka the underworld, where it lies dormant for a while of 3 days, just to push the stone away and walk in as a reconfigured body. But it has to die first. Horrible, painful death. where it's judged by the world and executed by the world and expelled by the world and thrown out, like a thief being crucified with two other thieves that at the moment of their death were still able to do the turnaround. The thieves being the representative of the greed and desire and whatever that is running this world. And even at the moment of death on Golgotha, the hill of the last stages of Christ, was this understanding that they too could do the turnaround in the last moments of their existence, which we've seen many times, that people when facing death, they are always doing whatever it takes, please forgive me and redeem me, and whatever it is. And these are just the stories that are made up. I'm not going into speculation of the true or whatnot, what was and what wasn't, and who historical figure or not, or whatever. It doesn't matter. These teachings have been highly distorted, but there is some portion of truth to them, as there are to all spiritual teaching systems. They have a core of truth. And the core of truth is the transformative processes that takes us out of the base program. The truth is the transfiguration, reconfiguration, I call it, of the energy system, so it's no longer aligned with this reality field. The truth is that there is a higher order awareness that is connected to a higher order multidimensional architecture of our being, which has been called soul. Soul comes from the understanding, it's Christianity, but it's based upon some old Greek concepts of the inner human, aka the psyche. That's what the soul is. It's just our psyche. It's rarely, Christianity doesn't go into previous lifetimes. We find that in other teaching systems. And these understandings of karma and rebirth are within the enclosure and the enslavement programs. So that's for the insectoids and avian-based civilizations that are here, and to some degree some mammals. But for those who are of the higher order caliber of configuration, meaning that they were brought here from other aspects of other realities as a punishment due to either resistance or other types of attempts to rise against the colonizing groups that were expanding throughout this quadrant as part of their reign to keep themselves going the last 15,000 years. And prior to that, redoing our entire quadrant of our universal structure that's connected to the outer domain. All civilizations that ends up in the outer domain, no matter where you are under these different groups that are having less and less possibilities of returning to the middle domain of the true progressive realities. There are groups within the middle domains that, of course, are regressed as well, and that's why the middle domain eventually also will fade away as the outer domain will turn to dust and cease to exist. The middle domain will eventually also turn into nothingness and be annihilated. And so will the core domain and the inner domain of the less progressive universal structure, because that project at large has failed as well. And on top level of it, there are no one upholding that. So you see the entire universal structure, that's the less progressive universe, is no longer being upheld. So of course it goes without saying that it's a domino effect where whatever this was failed, it's no longer being upheld. And of course everything that's in it must learn how to leave it, move beyond, and get back to the worlds where they originally came from in whatever capacity. All of us that's been part of the less progressive universal structure will begin from scratch in the true worlds, without any doubt. Because those of us who are in the outer domain, there is only begin all over and really reconfigure yourself to the degree that's possible to show that you actually can work conducively with energy and consciousness. But that's just enough to get you into the true fourth dimension, where you will get a vessel and then you will begin from scratch there, proving that you are no harm to yourself or others or reality itself. So that's the first important step. And that's been said in all teachings. Kindness, compassion, how to be coexisting with others, working as a team for the highest good of the many, to progress and transform the world you're part of. Step one. So we kind of acknowledge that. That's the first step of our on the subsidiary timeline. And to get there is that is a complete foundation of our core existence, not just in this life, but in all lives we have lived. We have resolved to that through different learning processes. So that's a core foundation in our architecture, that we know that that's important. And I was born that way. I was born not feeling the need to eat meat, but I did it anyways because that's kind of where you grow up and then eventually let it go. But I always found it super disgusting. The smell and everything, my whole body was just kind of, bleh. I did it anyways. I kind of numbed that down. All of the things that made me different, always standing out in a way that led to torment and ridicule and feeling not part of the group and just standing there and being the one that was pointed fingers at, that were being shunned, that was being misunderstood, that was just getting all of the beating verbally, emotionally, or whatever you want to call it. And in that way, just standing there and literally being the suffering Christ over and over and over again. And that's those of us who have the capacity to reach the fifth. We are kind of going through it. But there are also going people as part of the fourth cycle that used to be fifth dimensional as part of Atlantis, that are part of the redemption programs. In a way, you could say that I have been tied more to the redemption programs due to the dark one that I was born with, that I dragged with me from the Buddhist lifetime where I had that unfortunate demise. That got it stuck to me. And that way I've been pushed into the redemption programs, the crucifixion, more than actually the enslavement programs. So that's kind of been my life path, where that has been this weird, odd thing of being in a vessel that technically was part of the enslavement programs and did have a possibility. And at the same time that my higher order energy system were intertwined with the dark entity due to severe trauma of a past life. And then that got stuck in the fifth dimension in my energy field and then created this weird dichotomy and unstable balance between that thing that was in my field and the body that was something else, and my original energy system, creating a weird trinity that was struggling with each angle of its own trinity. Okay, so these are some of the things where we look back and say, okay, what have we been? Why are we here? What program have we been under? And all of this is just to let it go. At this point, standing on the doorway, before the doorway, and as a youngster, I used to draw a lot, and I actually drew the door when I was 12, standing there. The souls, I actually kind of saw it as a moment of death, which it is, the door to the other realms. I knew that door existed. I was aware of the transitions. I was aware of these things, but it was kind of halted due to the internal dynamics, as I said, between being a body that's not mine and cleaning that out, and all the lineages and everything that's connected to that. What was imbued into me due to past lives on unfortunate circumstances. And then the choices I did when coming back in and being judged by the brotherhoods and got into the weird programs, whatever. I wouldn't really call it enslavement programs. It was a kind of a work program to meet certain criterias, as called initiations, as in walking the original path of the original Pillar Project in multiple lifetimes to show that it is possible to do. And that way they could see how the original dynamics were done while I was being put into impossible scenarios that in each lifetime would lead to some kind of dysfunctionality of my higher order energy system. A very elaborate and detailed and complicated type of quote-unquote punishment for unlawful entry, as they called it. And each time it was about walking through the steps of the different pillars and showing again and again and again that no matter what happens, you can still do it. So my game has been, in spite and despite of all of the obstacles, to show again and again and again that it is possible. Sorry, my voice is getting a little bit strange here. It is possible to complete the programs. It is possible, no matter what hardship, to complete the programs. And that's why I've been revived again and again and again, because there was an interest in pushing me into all of the different scenarios of all of the groups of humanity to prove that it was possible to complete the programs. That's my punishment, to run through all of the levels of it. And that's why my journey has been completely different than many other people. And it took me a long time to realize why that was. So in a way, you can say, what's the correct commitment? Well, in all of that that's been thrown at me, I still have worked my way through my original mission statement. All of my memories, whatever it means and however it ended up there, the traitors, whatever's been going on, the treason, the judgment, all of these things are part of my understanding of who and what I am, and the work through these different levels of realization and acceptance and integration processes, and then cleaning out and letting it go and finding solutions and finding strategies just to be thrown back in a corner. I just went through one before I moved here to the island, and shortly after in 2024 that was very, 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 very complicated, and I was already on my knees, and then got more and more and more thrown at me until I literally just turned into a ball of rage that were getting closer and closer to the 2-8 pillar connection points, and as an attempt to actually draw me into that and potentially get me so aligned with it that I wouldn't be able to get out of it. But I got out of it again. I reached that same level in Australia. I got out of it there. So even though that everything in my life has turned my energy system into alignment with different levels of this reality controlled by the different factions, over and over again, through the right process of consciousness and transformation and kindness and activation of the heart field, and going into the processes and the strategies and diligently committing to the processes of what my original mission statement was, because they kind of said in the judgment, well, you're here to clean up whatever it is, so you better get into what, for whoever is there, what it means for them, that you're coming here to push the red button and set everything to default, and that's the punishment. Okay, you want to clear it up? Okay, you go in and you clean it all up, which I have to the best of my abilities. And I know it's not perfect, because then I wouldn't be here. And it is potentially not possible to the degree that the original subsidiary timeline would allow for, but many have tread this path already. We see it in all spiritual teaching systems. That's the path. That's the subsidiary timeline, the narrow path, the path of enlightenment, the path of liberation, the path of ascension, the path of elevation, the path of reaching the heavens, whatever you want to call it. That's the path we are on now, those of us who are invited again. We have called it many different things throughout history, and this is where I'm uniting all the teachings into the correct commitment. We're not doing this out of fear of death. Those who fear death will not be invited to the party. Because what is death? It's a transformation. And if that's not reconciled with and experienced and sensed due to many lifetimes of living and dying and experiencing the transition from one life into another and recalling these, and have reconciled with these dynamics of one existence transforming into another, even though it was under an enslavement scheme or redemption scheme or whatever it was on the stagnant cross, preventing us from activating our true consciousness. We are yet again standing in that choice and saying, I'm continuing, not by our will, not because we want to, not because we're afraid of something, but because that's how it is. And again, I will say, perhaps if I wasn't under the judgment and the programs of the brotherhoods, I don't know if I would have activated. I don't know. Because that's me. That's how I've done it. And that way, nobody can say, I'm going to be like Randy. You can't, because you're not on the same punishment. So you can't. You're on a different type of program that you must align with whatever is yours, as we talked about in your timeline and your energy system and your timeline. It all depends on what program you're under. That's where you're now standing in front of the door of the subsidiary timeline and looking back You must have a full, complete understanding who and what you are and what led you to this moment. Every detail of it, so you can see your own path. You can look back and you can see everything you used to be, everything you have been part of, everything that led you to this moment, every single life you have been going through the same stages again and again. Because once you step onto the subsidiary timeline and you connect with the core technology of the inner earth, that is the sphere of the sixth dimension that will uphold your molecular state and keep you locked into the subsidiary timeline, you are literally stepping out of the cave. You are opening the last door. You are leaving this reality. You are beginning the journey that will make you leave this world. And if you stand there and you feel this, you are doing this because you're running away from pain, then the door will remain closed. If you're trying to open the door because you want to achieve something, because you have greed and desire and ambition, you will not reach, the door will not open. But if you stand in front of the door being humble and understanding that everything you are has led to this moment, all of your mistakes and all your successes, and you with kindness and humble coherence, let's call it that, look back at everything you've been and you just see how it deteriorates and dustifies and there's nothing left because you have worked your way through all of it. You have acknowledged all of it. You have dealt with all of it. And that makes you humble and sad. And your heart begins to pound and expand, and your heart field shows you what it truly means to work for the highest good of the many. That you have had your own awakening. That you have been in service to others. That you have been in service to the world. That you have been in service to the worlds beyond. That you have gone under the directive of the councils, that you have expanded under the directive of the original civilizations, that you have followed the rules and the principles and the laws of energy, that you have worked to minimize distortion, that you have worked to upgrade consciousness within yourself and others that have been on the same code stream as you. That you have taken care of everything that was within your vicinity to the best of your abilities, that you have followed the laws of the cycle and done whatever it was possible to make the highest progression rate of whatever was given to you. Then you can pull the handle on the door. I'm here giving you a vision. Then the door will open. And that's the golden door. It will open. And then you will walk in and you are technically on the subsidiary timeline. So with that, it will show itself that you are welcome. It will almost get a kind of sign, welcome home kind of thing. But if you're going there because you want to go home, because you want to go home due to pain and sadness and neglect, and all sorts of things, imagining that everything on the other side of the door will be so much better, and that's why you want to go there. The door will be a door of steel. It will remain closed. There will be no access point, and it will not let you in. Correct commitment for the continuation scheme is one that's learned by processes that activate, clean up, integrate, implement, are being exemplified into some sort of service that follows the original 6 pillars of the Pillar Project. So that's one of the levels that are required. If you are part of one of the world religions and you have got yourself distorted into that, will you be invited to the continuation scheme? I don't know. If you follow the new spiritual teaching systems, will you be invited to the continuation scheme of the subsidiary path? I don't know, because I'm not that. I am the Pillar Project person. So I have worked my way through that scheme, through that understanding, through that progression type of developmental programs that has led me to the point where I will go on the continuation scheme to whatever means that is possible for me. Will I be thrown off? I don't know. Will it continue to be that? I don't know. I know what's now, and I will work for every now, committing myself to finding solutions at every now, to again doing what is the highest good of the many. So that means that even though I'm opening the door to the subsidiary timeline, will I then stop doing my service to others? Will I then stop doing my commitment for the highest progression rate? Will I then stop doing my commitment for the highest good of the many? Of course not. That's part of what it means to be an advanced civilization of the progressive worlds. It is naturally part of our every core essence being, whatever we are on whatever level, we will always revert to that. We will always find the balance point in that. Our coherence pattern is ingrained with that because we have lived that, exemplified that, done that through eons. It is a natural part of our higher order architecture. It is a natural part of how we utilize our consciousness. We do that as ingrained in us as it is. It's not even a choice. It's a natural feature of our very existence. Yes, we can falter and fall. Yes, we can make stupidities. Yes, we can be pulled into different timelines that reconfigures us and turns us into something else. But we work our way out of it again. We get back to who and what we truly are every single time. Sometimes quicker, other times it takes longer period of time. But we end there again and again. And when we look into the past of who and what we have been, we can see that that's what we have done in 80% of our previous existences. Yes, there are some where it did not work well. And these levels we have completed and segregated from and justified to the degree that was possible. And then the rest will just vanishes away as a completion of the original pillar project to undo the effects of the timeline event. So that's what gave me the ticket. Will I remain? I don't know. I don't care. Because whether I'm back on the main timeline or I get onto that one or whatever happens, I will still do as part of my everyday existence to reach the highest purity rate, the highest standards, and the highest progression rate. No matter what type of world I'm in, no matter what type of reality I'm in, no matter the dire circumstances. And if I should falter and fall completely and not be able to get out, well, then that's what it is. Then that's what that happens. Then there is a long journey that will lead to that. And then that is what it then will be. Let him put it that way. So there is this, of course, I don't want that to happen. But if I make a continuously amount of choices that leads to that path, get myself in situations that lead to that, then I must take the consequences of my choices and my actions. We are being offered a lot of opportunities all the time. And we make the choices all the time. And when we don't make the right choice, we still have the choice to turn around and do it better and get back on track. And so on the subsidiary timeline, where we will just be right inside the door for a very long time before we get the possibility to move on. Because step 2, where we get into the balance point, and step 3, where we get into the low participation, that's where we really, step 3 there, we have to go through another door, another level, another inclusive type of code configuration that must be integrated before we can go through that door. And then we will go through another set of 3 steps, mimicking the outer domain, the middle domain, the inner domain, and the core domain. And once we have reached the core domain of the subsidiary path, that is where we can then begin the processes of transformation to the original worlds, where we, of course, get into the safe zones, where we then again will have to go through different steps to prove that we are not harmful to the true worlds. So that's kind of what we call an air vent or something, where we get tested in the safe zones that will look like a type of reality, but not something that we are aware of. It will not be like this world whatsoever. Okay, I think that kind of suffices with the understanding of correct commitment and the visions and the understandings and the sciences and the knowledge that will come with that. And then, of course, we have correct use of energy and correct use of power. And then the vow and the will that kind of goes with 10th and 11th. But these two can also just be a podcast where I'm just talking about other levels of information. Because even though that we are on the inner level, in our inner work and clearing work and contemplation work goes through the different steps of the pillar project. So we reconfigure a higher order energy system and maintain it as such, so it keeps itself segregated from the main timeline. That will have less and less possibility in interference patterns and nodal points that can create bridges between our architecture and the Atlantean timeline, especially if we kind of don't look into these programs that they are putting out there, but are turning the other cheek and saying that's no longer for us, and just leave it be and say that's what they are doing, and they're in their full rights to do what they are doing, as we are in our full rights to do what we are doing. And that's the choice of the last levels of the last cycle of this civilization, as well as this reality field as it is. They will continue into the civilizations of this quadrant that will last 1500 years. And then once that's done, whatever they will do, that's their choice. That's not our business anymore. None of that is our business anymore. Our business is to keep ourselves within the continuation scheme. That's our business. So with that, our business is also how do we exemplify that in our everyday life? And that's where, after having done this course material, where I've gone up in energy and I've given the information I can give from my understanding of reality and how I work with my holographic energetic architecture, from what's been thrown at me, the incidents that I have been succumbed to and put through has assisted me in recreating my holographic architecture. It has also demolished huge part of it. So in that way, my holographic architecture is not intact anymore. There is a huge level of it that I just have to completely let go of and just disintegrate, because it was part of the base program of whatever timelines that were there as part of the colonization, and just letting all of that go, all of that beautiful work, just letting that go, because it's no longer conducive for the subsidiary path. So that's part of also letting go of everything we have built holographically and energetically as part of the transition sciences and the template sciences that, as you recall, were tied into the colonial programs of the distorted reality field and the colonial programs that were put there to enslave humanity. That was the path of liberation. And once you have liberated yourself, you let go of that energy system, because that's tied to the enslavement programs and the transformation out of that. And then you go into the fifth dimensional programs where you work with the crosses and the understanding of the fifth dimensional dynamics and what that is, and the technology and the sciences, to undo the stagnant cross and get into the movable, flexible, changing, progressive cross, and all of these different layers where you then change all of that into spheres of energy. That's part of the reconfiguration processes that matches the subsidiary timeline. The energy system must match the timeline you're on, or the code configuration you are becoming part of. Holographic architecture must match the code stream you're on, and you match it by following the guidelines, the rules and principles and laws of that code stream, and you use your consciousness potentials to reconfigure the energy units according to the holographic teaching system information you're getting from the code stream, according to the teachings that are given to you from the code stream itself. That's where we commit now to say, show us the teachings, the sciences, the ways to behave on the subsidiary timeline. Becoming a student again and letting the holographic teaching system of the subsidiary timeline teach you. The sciences, the cube technology, the programs that are on the subsidiary timeline will teach you. And that's why it's super important you understand it's technology, so you don't fall into the trap of beings and holographic entities and whatnot. This is information that comes directly into your brain from where you know exactly what to do and you're the one to exemplify it. You're the one to put it into manifestation or co-creation. You're the one to implement it and make it part of your everyday life. And you're the one that must uphold and maintain what you have been given. That is what we are going to commit to, and that is what we will do the next 50 years. And with that, I'll end this podcast. Thank you.